You ever leave a conversation feeling like you said too much, but you still weren't heard, or that the way you communicate makes sense, but it doesn't seem to have the results that you were looking for? And I don't just mean in the moment either. Maybe it's something where it's an interpersonal relationship where you just can't quite seem to connect with somebody. You can't quite seem to persuade them the way that you want to. Or maybe it's in a situation like at work where you're more competent than somebody else, and yet they still seem to always get ahead. They always seem to be able to work the social game and play politics, and they just have a better effect on people. And you're realizing that, hey, communication is actually a very important skill, and it's not necessarily guaranteed to develop along with the actual tangible skill that you specialize in. And if that's the case, this episode is going to give you some of the practical tools that you'll need in order to play social situations like a chess game. And it boils down to this. Influence is emotional warfare, and words are really just camouflage. You've probably heard before that people will forget what you say, but they won't forget how you made them feel. Or maybe you've heard it's not about what you say, but about what you make them feel. And that sounds good. It sounds like a satisfying little one liner to throw out there. And it's something that people will say at seminars and on podcasts, and they don't really explain how to do that practically. And it drives me crazy because it doesn't actually help you unless you have the tools to make them feel differently. And I'm going to talk about a couple different things in this episode as far as how to do that. And I also want to just keep constantly reiterating that this is the goal. It's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it. And if you said the right thing at the right time, and to just shift that mindset away from, I'm going to say what's on my mind and say what I think needs to be said, and to start getting into the other person's shoes a little bit and understanding them. And that definitely begins with empathy, but also at the same time, it's not necessarily that you have to go around just being super empathetic and emotionally open to a bunch of people. It has a lot to do with the way that you think about your communication and you think about other people. Because I know this is definitely true for me. I'm sure it is for others as well. When we talk, we kind of think about the things that we want to say and the points that we want to get across, but we don't necessarily spend a lot of time strategizing over how will this affect somebody. And there's certain times where you just need to be honest and upfront and you just need to say what you need to say. But then there's a lot of times where if it's going to be a long-term relationship with people and you are not conscious of the effect that you have on them, it can create a lot of friction and you won't know why these people don't like you and why you don't get along, and it can be incredibly frustrating. And I know this because I've been through it as well. I was homeschooled growing up. I was not socialized very well, and wasn't really around people until I was about 17. That's when I joined the military, and all of a sudden I was around a ton of people. And that first 2 years was really, really hard. And that was for a lot of reasons, but one of them was that I just didn't fit in. I didn't understand how to connect with people. I didn't understand how to play the social and political games that were taking place within the unit, but then also in terms of the actual Marine Corps and trying to get promoted and trying to advance my career and get ahead. And it was very difficult and disheartening. And I started to eventually take this seriously. I took it as a skill and said, well, how can I really lean in and learn how to communicate, learn how to fit in with others, and also learn how to play this game correctly. I didn't want to be a manipulative person, but I also didn't want to be the guy that lost out to the popular person just because people liked him more. And I don't want you to be in that situation either. So the first thing we'll go over is how important it is to discipline yourself to allow other people to talk. Basically boils down to just learn how to shut up when necessary. And that wasn't the first point that I wanted to put on here because I didn't want people to hear that and go, oh, this video is just going to be rehashing old stuff. These are things that I've heard before. That's not impressive. Like, obviously, you should let people talk. If you're trying to learn how to communicate with them and you're just talking over the whole time, then that get duh. That makes sense, right? But the thing is that we have to start here because if you're just going at it and you're trying to work with people and talk with people that you don't understand, you're in a bad situation. Any professional chess player would study their opponent before they have a match together. Any professional fighter is going to study their opponent before they have a match together. Any political candidate is going to study the opposition before they go toe to toe with that individual. And it doesn't change when it comes to your office, when it comes to relationships, when it comes even just friends. And this again, this doesn't have to be a big deal or you're trying to climb some sort of ladder. It could just be the fact that, hey, I don't think that my friends and I are really getting along too well right now. And I think I might be the problem. I just want to learn to communicate better. It doesn't matter what it is. Strategy requires a certain amount of understanding of the other person. And so to be intentional and strategic about the way you communicate and conduct yourself through life in general, you have to get information about the other person. But of course, on a bigger scale, if you are playing some sort of power game to trying to get ahead in your career, you will not succeed in that if you don't get out of your own head, because you'll just be thinking about things from your own perspective. Your ego will get in the way. Your desires will be projected onto them. The thought processes that make sense to you might not make sense to other people. It's just not going to work too well. You might be able to scrape by, but you could do a lot better if you take the time to get information from other people and just observe them, not in a creepy way. Don't be weird about it, but ask them questions and let them talk. Don't rush to judgment about the things that they're saying. Don't assume that you know if they're telling a story and you think you know where it's going and you think you know what the takeaway is. And it's like, oh, I've got this, like I went through something similar and I want to talk about what I learned from that too. That's perfectly fine when you're connecting with people and they share a story and you say, oh yeah, I resonate with that because I had a similar situation, right? So that I think again, pretty self-explanatory. We won't beat it to death. But the other thing that I want to talk about for me personally, what was super, super hard is that I felt so much anxiety about where I was at. And I knew that I wasn't very socially competent. And so I felt a lot of pressure to try to make up for that. And so I would try to force jokes and I would try to get into every conversation. And when I was somewhere, I felt like I had to be on all the time. I had to be everywhere. I had to be constantly just the guy with the one-liners and always have an insight. And the first big change that occurred for me was when I decided I'm just going to be quiet and I'm going to watch other people and I'm just going to get a sense of their rhythm. I'm going to see what are the things that they say? How do they act in these different situations? And again, my situation might be different from yours, but that was really helpful because one of the things I wanted to develop was just the ability to fit in. And so I would watch what do the cool kids do, how what is their sense of timing? And some people I'm not that's not my personality. I can't copy that person. However, you can learn something from everyone. And I treated every single conversation like an opportunity to get better, just to constantly practice communicating, to constantly try to learn something from every single thing that people said. Maybe I was a little bit more observant. Maybe I noticed something that I hadn't before. Maybe I've realized that that conversation in the context of other things that have happened start to show some sort of pattern, or maybe at the same time I realized that hey, this person actually is thinking strategically, and I thought at first that their idea for this project didn't make any sense. However, when they when it played out, I realized that they understood something about the people involved that I did not. And so it worked and I'm confused and I'm like, I don't get it. Like I wouldn't have approached things that way, but that's what I'm here to learn. Okay. Believe it or not, this is something that's easier said than done. So, some practical tips for that are when you do talk to people, try to make them feel appreciated, not in a sycophantic way, not in like you're hyping them up for no reason when you're trying to boost their ego, but make them feel important, make them feel like you value what they bring to the table. Let them know without being weird, obviously, like, hey, I appreciate that you do that thing, or I was impressed by something that your work ethic or the way that you handle that situation, whatever it is. When you can learn to listen to people and watch them intentionally, what will happen is that eventually you'll start to kind of get tuned into their their mindset, the way that they see things, their perspective, and you'll start to be able to tell what were they trying to do. And so maybe they weren't even necessarily successful in that, but you understand their approach, their strategy, and you can complement that. You can complement the effort and the intention behind it. And that doesn't necessarily have to be something that's done explicitly, but in general, we get very caught up in our own self and our own head, and we go into a situation and somebody else is funnier than we are, and we might feel like, dang, like I want to outdo that person. And I'm not saying that you can't do that. I'm not saying that there isn't a time and place for it, but until you develop a good sense of timing and situational awareness and you really understand the people that you're around, it's best to be somewhat cautious. And as you do this over time, you'll get better and better. And you don't have to be as cautious in the beginning because you've integrated all these little observations and the things that you've learned to do and to not do, and it'll get easier for you. Some people will say, listen, that sounds very manipulative. It sounds like you're being intentional about figuring people out and learning how to work with them better. It's like, okay, fine. Well, if that's how you feel about it, don't do it. Go home and be upset and complain about the fact that other people get ahead and have the things that you want, even though you're better than them in some ways, maybe professionally, like you are more competent than them, but they seem to get ahead. Like, keep complaining about that. This is a social skill. And it's not necessarily taught. It's something that we just pick up. And so if you're not someone who's just naturally really good socially and really good at, I don't want to say the word politics too much, but that's kind of what it is. Like, if you're in a corporation and you're trying to figure out how to deal with these different personalities and progress in your career, which is twofold. It's not just your ability to do the job, it's also what people think of you because you're part of a team. You're part of a group of people that's bigger than yourself. And it's actually a sign of maturity that you take a minute and learn how to deal with those people better. And can it be manipulative? Sure, anything can if you abuse it. And if you are a bad person and you misuse this stuff, then like, yeah, that's an issue. But it's not a problem with the tool, it's a problem with the application. And you may be very surprised at how quickly things change for you for the better when you start just being intentional and treating every single conversation and every single day that you live as if it is an opportunity to learn more about other people, to get better at communication, and just to get better in general. And by the way, that's a fantastic skill to have because a lot of higher level things involve those intangible soft skills, and a lot of like a lot of business hinges on relationships. And in an actual like romantic relationship, that kind of depends a lot on your ability to communicate. And just saying, well, that's who I am, that's the way I do things, I'm not going to change. That's just immaturity. That doesn't mean that you have to change your personality. It just means that you need to learn some new skills. And again, you may be watching this saying, okay, but that's so simple, that's so basic, let's just fast forward and get to the next part. But my question for you is, do you actually do this? I know it's simple, I know it's the basics, but are you brilliant in the basics or are you ignoring them and wondering why things are difficult down the road? And it's because you actually just didn't handle the fundamentals correctly. If you learn nothing from this video, but you go out and take action on the basic things that you already know you should be doing, I'll still have considered my job well done just for getting that point across. Another thing with that is to try to figure out not just the other person, the way they communicate, but why are they trying to present themselves in that way? What front are they putting up and what effect are they trying to have? And try to figure out like what might be the intention behind that facade that they put up. And it's not always that people are being fake, but we say what we do for a reason. The person that's always funny is trying to accomplish something with that. The person that is always the go-getter is trying to accomplish something with that. The person that is always just calm and nice and kind to everybody, they're trying to accomplish something like that. None of those things are inherently bad. I'm not saying that you need to be like, what's your game? What's your angle? And try to figure like it's not necessarily a competition. It's just that when you understand, hey, this person is this way because they're insecure, well, that's a sign that maybe you should be careful with how you talk to them so that you don't accidentally rub them the wrong way. Sometimes you have to, and I'm not saying to be empathetic to a fault, just understand what you're doing. Instead of seeing that character as being annoying or fake, try to decipher what it is that they want to gain and offer that thing to them. That gives you leverage in the relationship. It gives you a way to make yourself more valuable to them. And again, it's not a manipulative, dirty thing where you're trying to just take advantage of other people. It's just understanding that everyone wants something and it may just be to be liked. And if you genuinely kind of like that person, but you don't express it well, you can improve that relationship a lot by just learning to show that appreciation. That might be as simple as it is. But here's some examples. So the overly assertive person might, for example, be hiding a fear of powerlessness. And that can look like the control freak, the someone who's always interrupting and dominating conversations. And what they want is probably to feel respected and control, and if nothing else, not overlooked. So again, I'm not saying that you have to figure this person out and use it to manipulate them, but you can, in that conversation, just let them know that, hey, I'm not ignoring you or disagreeing with you because I don't respect you or your opinion. I have a separate set of reasons, and here's what they are. And you can communicate with that person more efficiently. And some ways to make them feel better is maybe you defer to their input occasionally. You ask for their opinion or give them credit publicly, just little things like that. Number two is excessive humor. And that could be, and again, could be, I'm not saying for sure, I'm just giving you examples, things to think about and to kind of help you get down this train of thought. Excessive humor could be fear of rejection. And what that looks like is sometimes just always joking, avoiding serious conversations, the self deprecating thing. That was me. I was constantly self deprecating all the time. And it was honestly because I felt like I wasn't super funny and people were going to make fun of me anyway. So why not make them laugh at me and show that I'm okay with it? And that works to a point, but there's some pretty serious drawbacks to it down the road. That's a separate conversation. But it's pointing out that in that situation, I may have been a little bit annoying and I may have created an impression of myself that wasn't necessarily the best. And my intention behind it was I really just wanted to fit in. I just really just wanted people to like me. And when I see other people do that, perfect example is that I try to be a little bit patient with them and just understand, hey, you're getting on my nerves, but I get it. Like I understand where you're coming from. That's where that empathy comes in. And there are certain people that are just super manipulative. They're out to get you. They're trying to hurt you, and that would be a separate conversation. That would be an approach where you have to be tactical and you have to protect yourself, and maybe you do have to kind of fight a little bit. But again, I don't think that those are the majority of situations, but they're also not uncommon. And the only way you're gonna be able to discern the difference between these 2 things is if you learn to really get good at understanding people. And when you start to understand them better, then when something's out of place and it's, like, predatory and, aggressive for no reason, that stuff stands out a little bit more. But what you see a lot of people on social media, especially do these days, is that they go around telling everyone that they're a narcissist. My ex is a psychopath. My boss is a narcissist. My so and so is super immature, and those things might be true sometimes. But when that's the only solution, that's the only explanation that we have for why somebody is not doing things our way, they're not listening to us, or whatever it is, it doesn't really work. It makes us the perpetual victim, and that's not a good place to be for your own mental health and for your productivity in the world. And so one more that we have is the perfectionist, and that person could just be afraid of being seen as incompetent, and it can show up as nitpicking, procrastination, micromanaging, things like that. And what they want to be seen as is capable and valuable. Now, if you're their boss and they absolutely suck, like I'm not saying that you have to lie to them, but you can find ways to frame things as an issue with the actual stuff that they're doing versus them as a person. Never make others feel small unless your intention is to intimidate them. And I point that out because I think that in general, intimidation is not the best tactic. I think that there are some cases where it is a good strategy and it is a good solution. But in general, if your goal is to make people afraid of you and you're not someone who is actually a fearsome opponent and someone who can actually maintain that, you're going to get eaten alive. And even if you are that person and you don't learn ways to make others feel at ease with you, then you're going to be constantly at war with the world. And that's going to drain you. It's you against everyone, and you're not stronger or smarter than everyone put together. Again, certain situations where that makes sense, but even in the Marine Corps and the infantry, there were there was a higher percentage of people who were like that, for sure, without a doubt. But even those people, they had to work so hard at what they did and to be the best at what they did because everyone was constantly ready to jump at them. If they made any mistake, like nobody wanted to listen to them. And we're a bunch of people who are, pretty willing to face our fears. So even if we are afraid of someone, we're not necessarily going to be a good candidate for control. And I don't think that trying to control other people practically is a good idea. Obviously, I have an issue with it morally, but all I'm trying to get at here is that we all have this tendency when we feel threatened is to lash back out and to try to put other people's down sometimes. And I think that most of us will learn to kind of control that a little bit. But if you pay attention and you're honest with yourself, there's a good chance that you're going to notice that you do it in certain ways and that you're trying to maybe win a bantering session or something and you take it a little bit too far. We all do that sometimes. And it's one of those things that you just have to be really careful about because if you rub somebody the wrong way once, they may be forgiving, they may be a hospitable, generous person, and they may not be. And it also may be just a lot more serious than you thought it was, and it hit a nerve. And if that's your boss or somebody, if that's someone you're in a relationship with, somebody that's like important, it's a friend, that can be a big problem, especially if you have a habit of doing it. And it's something that you would probably change if you knew it was there because you care about these people, I'm assuming. And it really is just an issue of ignorance, but it's on you to start to uncover those things and to work through them and to develop as a person. Now, back to the intimidation thing, one thing I will say with that is you definitely don't want to be the kind of person that's just always trying to make everyone afraid of them. That's exhausting. A possible alternative, if you have the personality for it, and if you don't try to do it, is playing the unpredictable rage card. Sometimes I get a little bit feisty and I lash out a bit and I act a little bit crazy. And it's just to let people know that, like, hey, like I'm a super nice guy, but that's intentional. And again, that's not something I do at work. It's not something that I do in my friendships or relationships, anything like that. But every now and again, there's a place for it. In general, I think it's much better, especially as a man, if you are able to present yourself as someone who is in control of their emotions, someone who is not going to lash out. And so, again, if you're doing this, it had better be a strategy, not a weakness, because if somebody else is also playing these games, or even if they're not doing it intentionally, a lot of manipulative people, they love rage. They love it when people get angry because it's really hard to control yourself and to think clearly in those moments. And so if they can find ways to just get you angry, they will. I'll read some of my notes here. We often see conversations as a way to impose our will and to prove ourselves, and we forget to consider how that'll make others feel. It's okay to offend people when it's for a good reason, but doing it inadvertently will create unnecessary friction in your life. And a good example of that, if you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, which there's some spoilers in here, but the movie's been out for a couple years, so I'll just give you the brief overview is that one of the main pieces of that story is that he's a brilliant scientist, but somewhere along the way there was a guy in Washington who was involved in the Manhattan Project, and Oppenheimer kind of rubbed him the wrong way. He embarrassed him publicly, and it's not really clear in the movie. I don't know how accurate it was historically. It's not really clear exactly if he hated that person, or maybe it was, and I just didn't get the movie. But basically, in the long term, this guy was out to get him, and he got him into some legal trouble and orchestrated this whole situation where he went behind his back and was working with others who did not like Oppenheimer. And was basically trying to get him put in jail. And so you have this person who has accomplished a great deal and he's incredibly smart, but because of a political issue, his life was almost over. His life work almost went down the drain because one person was had a bruised ego. And unfortunately, that happens all the time. It's in the story because it's true. Like that is part of human nature. Not everyone is that vindictive and that calculated with the revenge, but one, there are people like that for sure. I've dated at least one of them and I've worked with a few more. On the other hand, even if that's not the measure somebody goes to, do you really want people that are mad at you for no reason? And I'm not saying that you have to walk on eggshells around everybody, but be cognizant of the way that your words affect other people. Again, it starts with observation, it starts with empathy, and just learning to be very intentional about what you say and what you do from the mindset that this other person is just as complicated as me. They want certain things, they don't want other things. How can I work with them best? And that may be situationally dependent, but you understand what I'm saying. So let's go through a couple of examples here. The strategy behind this first one would be appealing to ego, fears, and desires. So everyone wants to feel like the hero of their own story. And we all kind of consider ourselves the main character in our story. Like nobody goes home and says, "Man, this great guy who has everything going for him, and he's the hero of this story, and I just can't quite fit into this narrative." Like nobody says that. Everybody goes home and complains about this dude that's ruining my life, or this girl that's causing problems for me. And it's like it's never in that situation. And so one thing that you can do is you can frame your offer, your presence, your message in a way that makes them feel smart, strong, desired, respected, valued. And that could really just come down to like nothing changes in what it is that you're trying to accomplish or the conversations that you want to have. It's just the way that you frame it. So instead of saying, I need you to do XYZ, it's framed in the context of maybe this is our relationship. I really value it. And the way that you can help me make it better is through this. And I know you can do that because you're really good at XYZ, right? And one example I'll point out here that may help illustrate is that especially dudes, like younger guys, when they're trying to talk to girls, they're really in their head, and I was too for sure, but they're really in their head about like what do I say to make myself look cool? What do I say to make myself seem funny and seem like a smart person? And they don't really sit back and try to figure out, well, what does this person actually want? What do women actually want? And we like to throw that phrase around like, no one knows what women want and they don't even know what they want. And that's true to some extent, but it's also really not. A lot of people in general just don't have self awareness. And so they may think that they want one thing and then they're led by their desires, or they're saying the thing that they think other people want to hear and they're not being very honest about it. But when you're talking to anyone, but especially if you're pursuing someone romantically, you need to be thinking about what is the story that they tell about their lives and how can I present myself as someone who would aid in that. And I'm not saying to be fake and to like figure out, well, this person wants a millionaire and I don't have any money, therefore I'm going to find ways to make it look like I have money, or like don't do stuff like that. But just understand that people, they want to be seduced and they want to be enchanted. Nobody wants to go to on a date and have the person say, you know what, you check all my boxes. I think this will work. Like they want to know that they have an impact on you and that there's a story that's unfolding and that this is interesting. It feels larger than life. It feels exciting. It feels like we're on an adventure together. It not like it's a transactional thing where, yeah, I like you, let's hang out more. I can stand to talk to you and you're attractive enough and you have whatever qualifications, therefore we're going to be together. No, like people want to get caught up in falling in love. And at work, that might be a little bit more subtle. It might just be understanding, hey, you know, my the people that are responsible for my promotion, they want certain things. How do I play into that? Again, not to be fake, not to be dishonest about it, just to be smart. How can I help my boss look good? I'm having a hard time closing the sale. Well, how can I make my client feel better about themselves? Because it seems like they want control of the situation. And I'm telling them, no, 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 we have to do it this other way. They don't agree with it and they might decide to not go with me. Well, how do I make them feel like this is the best option and that they're choosing it? Proverbs 27:18 says, workers who protect their employer's interest will be rewarded. So helping the boss look good when they know it's you, but staying humble, it makes you really valuable. And humility in general is a great characteristic to have. And it's something that you should focus on producing naturally in yourself, but it might not start off natural. It may start off as a conscious decision to just not take credit for things that you know you did. And maybe you worked really, really hard, but you're willing to let others take the glory for it. Or you don't look for attention, you don't look for validation, or at least you don't make it look like you are. And for sure, you can get taken advantage of if you do that. However, if you don't develop the trait of humility, you won't really know when it's a good time to stand up for yourself versus when it's just your ego that's being involved. And so you might think that you're being taken advantage of. In reality, you're just a pain in the ass and nobody wants to deal with you. And you won't be able to discern the difference between those two things if you're led by your pride. And so you have to offset that by developing the characteristic, the trait of humility. And then the last point for that one is content. So you may notice how I explain some things in detail. This is my notes, by the way, that I'm reading. I explain some things in detail, but sometimes leave it vague to invite reflection. I don't want to over explain everything to you, but I also want to present things in a way that is actually useful. I don't want to throw out some interesting phrases that sound good and then you leave and don't have anything to work with. I would rather go through the basic stuff that seems self-explanatory and actually make sure that you're doing things right from the get-go than to try to jump ahead and just assume that you know all the advanced tactics and all the strategy of life and everything. But at the same time, there is a balance to be struck between that and not just telling people what to think. And I leave certain things vague so that it opens the door for your own imagination, for your own thought processes. And you have to do that with people as well. You don't necessarily have to tell someone that you're dating everything about yourself. You don't have to be too quick to give them information. You want them to fantasize a little bit. You want them to think about you a little bit. If you just send them a text of everything that you've done in your life and that's it, they know you perfectly well. Well, there's no mystery there. There's no excitement. There's nothing to uncover. There's nothing to develop and to gain. And I think a lot of people make that mistake where they try to just bombard the other person with all this information, and it's understandable to want to move past the super superficial things as quickly as possible. I totally understand that. And I'm on the same page with you there. But again, it's how you make them feel. not what you say. And if you make them feel like, okay, this person is just trauma dumping and boring, and I know everything about them, doesn't invite any room for my own reflection, it's not interesting. Sorry. And we'll move through the rest of this pretty quickly. So, again, mostly reading off my notes here. People have hidden insecurities. Use them, don't trigger them. And when I say use them, just have to understand that some people are manipulative and they're going to do this anyway. So, when I say use them, I don't mean to take advantage of anybody. I mean to just understand that what is the leverage that I have in this situation, or what are the things that I need to avoid if I don't want to step on somebody's toes. Because if you don't practice this stuff on a daily basis, when it comes time for like a real negotiation, it's a business deal, it's a job performance review, it's a date with somebody who is intelligent and they're actually asking questions because they're trying to get something, they're trying to understand something, trying to figure out, is this person actually good for me or not, and they know what they want. If you haven't been practicing how to pick up on that, you're probably not going to know what's going on in the heat of the moment when the stakes are high and your nerves are on edge. This needs to be part of who you are and how you relate to people. So on a day-to-day basis, that may look more like something like, instead of telling a woman how beautiful she is, well, what does she value about herself? What are the qualities and characteristics? What is the impression that she's trying to make? How can you compliment that instead, in a genuine way, if possible, ideally? At work, don't be the person that's great at what you do, but is completely rebellious and nobody can tell them anything and they're just insufferable to work with. That creates friction that you don't need. And again, a lot of you might think that goes without being said. That's not true, though. A lot of people do this, and I used to at one point. That's why I wish somebody had told me back then, and I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Next up is to prioritize warmth in order to build trust. So don't be the person that says, I'm just real, I'm just honest, I'm blunt, that's who I am, I'm upfront. It's like, no, you're not just honest, you're rude. You don't have any tact. You have your edges are very, very rough and they could stand to be smoothed out a little bit. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be honest or that you should beat around the bush and just like dance around questions and not give an honest account of what you think and what you want. I'm just saying that when you prioritize your self-expression over the relationship and the connection, that's when you get into a lot of trouble. And so a huge difference that this makes in business, and this is something that I've known for a long time with sales, is that you can have the best product and you can have the best pitch ever. And if the person doesn't feel good with you, they don't trust you, they don't feel like they can, a sense of warmth, like they can really bond with you, they're probably not going to buy. There are some people that are super technical and they don't want the emotional side of things. And if I feel like somebody is trying to pull my strings and make me feel good, but they're not backing it up with anything, that's an issue for me as well. Um, but you shouldn't assume that everyone's looking at you that way. It's perfectly fine to be blunt, for lack of a better word, to put it bluntly. But at the same time, understand that you can still frame things and you can still package them in a way that makes the other person comfortable. And that should always be a priority for the majority of the time. Some notes that I have on this: demonstrating expertise or brilliance won't get you far if the other person feels like you lack goodwill. Without trust, showing off can backfire and seem threatening. Now, again, that's situational dependent. And sometimes maybe you do want to intimidate people because it's some kind of competition and you want that psychological edge. Just be smart about it. So now that the mindset stuff is out of the way, let's get into the practical things. So it's not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. And when it comes to tone and delivery, I find that Jordan Belfort's tonalities are very helpful as a reference for this. If you don't know who that is, it's the guy that they based the movie Wolf of Wall Street off of. He was a sales guy who wasn't necessarily a reputable person, but some of his understanding of human nature is very valuable. And again, it's a tool. How you use it is up to you. I recommend doing it in a moral way. And there's always some risk that I talk about this stuff and, oh no, someone's going to take it the wrong way and manipulate. Listen, those people are doing that anyway. I want to equip the folks like me who don't think this way naturally and didn't learn this stuff growing up and were taken advantage of a lot by people who understood this intuitively, and the, strategic masterminds who spent time studying other people for their own personal gain. Like, they're out there. And if you don't learn how to do this, you won't be able to protect yourself from them. And at the same time, you're going to lose out to them a lot. So according to Jordan Belfort, tonality is the hidden language of influence. While words create the logical case for a product, it's the way that we use those words and the way that they're delivered that evokes an emotional response. So it conveys certainty, confidence, and conviction, beneath the surface of your words. In sales, it's not just what you say, but how you say it that triggers trust, authority, and emotional response. Tonality allows you to control the frame of the conversation, subtly leading the prospect's emotional state and guiding their perception of your value. By mastering your tone, whether it's certainty, scarcity, empathy, or curiosity, you bypass logical resistance and speak directly to the subconscious, where decisions are made. Remember, you decide with emotion and justify with logic. To Belfort, tonality is the difference between sounding like a desperate amateur and a trusted expert. So just think about how enthusiasm is contagious. When other people are going through grief, it pulls you into that and you feel bad for them, right? I can present to you a great case for why you should buy my product, why you should go out with me, why you should hire me, why you should still be friends with me even after I did something that I shouldn't have. I can present these things to you and they may make perfect sense, but that other person has a whole emotional world going on behind the surface that you know nothing about. And if they are feeling uncomfortable with you or they feel like they want to go in another direction and you have a good case to be made and you can't get through to them through the emotions, you're screwed. You're not gonna close that deal. You're not gonna get that date. You're probably not gonna get that job unless they're just desperate. And again, this isn't to be dishonest. It's just to understand, okay, what are these words trying to accomplish? How can I say them in a way that actually evokes that emotional response? So I'm trying to tell you something that is sad and I'm trying to inspire you to action so that you help with this sad situation. Well, can I let some grief slip into my voice? If I just make my case in a very deadpan, monotone way, it's probably not going to have a big impact. Somebody's scared, they're freaking out. I don't want to buy this car. I'm scared of blah, 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 blah. Okay, if you can't communicate calmness through your tone and like through your body language, then you can tell them, no, the car is perfectly fine. They're going to feel like you just don't care about their situation. They're not going to feel connected to you. You need to be able to speak to them on the level of logos, pathos, and ethos, basically. So here's a couple of the tonalities that you can start with. And again, you can look at his page and his content for more in-depth training on this sort of thing. I'm stealing all this from him. But one is scarcity and urgency. So the idea of scarcity that creates FOMO, fear of missing out, by implying that there is a limited time or availability. So hey, get this deal now because it expires at midnight. Hey, go out with me tonight. I'm talking to other people. Maybe phrase that one a little bit differently, but you understand what I'm saying. Next up, as far as tonalities, is absolute certainty. So this projects total belief in what you're saying, which is crucial for establishing authority. If you are not confident when you are giving people the solution to a problem, they're probably not going to listen to you. Then there's sincerity that communicates honesty, transparency, and builds trust. So again, if you say something in a way that it doesn't sound believable, it's going to be an issue because there's an incongruency between what you're saying and what you're actually communicating on a nonverbal level. People aren't going to feel good about that. And they may not be able to put their finger on it, but it'll seem like a bad idea and they won't trust you. There's a reasonable tone, which makes you sound logical and rational and not pushy, just somebody that it makes sense to talk to this person. What they're telling me is not like this emotional hype where they're trying to convince me to do something. It's just, hey, does this not make sense? It makes sense, right? There's the questioning tone, there's the empathetic tone, there's the I have a secret where you lower your voice, you draw them in, you imply that, hey, like this isn't something that's for everybody else. This happens all the time, by the way. It seems unnatural when I do it like to my camera with nobody else in here. But the truth is that if I want to tell somebody like a close friend a secret, I lower my voice. That's just natural. And those are kind of the main ones that you should worry about. But just remember that the way you frame things in the words, if you can be intentional about understanding the person that you're talking to, and I'm not saying that you have to change your message, that you have to be dishonest or fake, just that certain people are going to receive certain information differently. Tailor your approach accordingly. That's all. And then remember that you're not convincing people, you're just lowering resistance. If you're trying to force somebody into a decision, that would be an ethical issue. If you're trying to understand that, hey, this person has preconceived notions about me, about what I'm trying to communicate to them, about the situation. Their heads in other places. They have a lot of reasons to not listen to me. They have a lot of reasons to not give me what I want. If there are certain things like a lack of trust, for example, how can I communicate trust better? How can I communicate that I'm competent, that I'm honest, and that I'm a good person to work with? And again, in an authentic way that's not manipulative or devious. But I may notice, hey, this person is resistant to me because there's something about my personality that they don't like. Well, I don't have to change who I am for a relationship, but that doesn't mean I can't mature and adapt my approach to that individual if it's appropriate. At work, the reality is that your personality is not really the most important thing. And if you can't fit in with other people, then that's a problem with your immaturity, not necessarily with that company or with that group of people. And it may not be fair. I know that that's where people push back a lot. Well, this person's not working on themselves. This person's not worrying about me, and I'm putting myself out there. I'm spending all this time thinking about other people, and they just steamroll me. Yes, that is a problem. But again, if you get good at communicating and good at relating to other people, you can work your way out of that a lot faster to where you are in a position of power and you have some control and some agency in your life, and you can kind of make better decisions about the people that you spend time with. Trying to just, go to blows with them is probably not the best approach. So I hope that this gave you a good introduction to how to influence people better, how to communicate a little bit more effectively. Stay tuned. There's going to be some more episodes coming. Just getting back into this series. It's my first one in a while. If it's a little rough, I apologize, but I'm super excited to be doing this again. This is what I love to do. And I missed everyone that has followed me for years. And I feel bad that I let them down for a while there. Wasn't making any content, but I think that that's going to lead to a better show in the long run. So I'm excited. And, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to reach out to me and I will see you soon.